is 6 p.m. and this is CBX Business News. The business news headlines are brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible. Melissa's jobs shock, billions in untapped tax revenue, and rate pressures build in Europe. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Wednesday, August 12, 2026. I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Hurricane Melissa wipes out more than 30,000 jobs, with the ILO estimating the economic hit at 2.9% of Jamaica's GDP. Also ahead, the IMF identifies major untapped revenue potential in the Dominican Republic, with billions lost through gaps in tax collection. And later, German bond yields hold near 3.1% as rising inflation pressures strengthen expectations for another ECB rate hike. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
I'm trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
I'm also trading stocks to achieve my financial goals.
Start a conversation with the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Check jamstockx.com for information and a list of registered stockbrokers. You can also call the Jamaica Stock Exchange at 876-967-3271 for information on how to begin. I am achieving my financial goals.
I'm achieving my financial goals.
The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances tease the senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with a new assessment of Hurricane Melissa's economic fallout. Jamaica's labor market is carrying a heavy economic toll from Hurricane Melissa, with a new assessment estimating the Category 5 storm potentially cost the country 30,400 jobs and about 2.9% of annual economic output. The findings are contained in an August 2026 assessment from the International Labour Organization, ILO, which used satellite imagery, building damage data, and labor market statistics to measure the economic disruption caused by the hurricane. The ILO estimates more than 500,000 workers were exposed to hurricane force winds above 120 kilometers per hour, including approximately 288,000 informal workers. Women accounted for roughly 233,000 of the workers in the highest wind speed zone, while more than 60,000 were young workers. But exposure does not mean all of those jobs were lost. The ILO cautions that the number represents workers potentially at risk because of their location, while its economic modeling puts the potential national employment impact at over 30,000 jobs. The ILO is now warning that without targeted intervention, those temporary disruptions risk becoming longer-term unemployment, poverty, and structural economic damage, particularly for informal workers and small businesses. It is recommending targeted recovery measures for tourism, agriculture, and construction, expanded support for informal workers, concessional financing and grants for MSMEs, and emergency employment programs in some of the hardest hit parishes. At the same time, Jamaica is approaching a major demographic turning point that could reshape the country's growth prospects and place increasing pressure on public finances. A new 2026 study by the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, projects that Jamaica's demographic dividend, measured using its economic support ratio, will end around 2035. That means the economic advantage created by having a relatively large productive population is expected to diminish as fertility declines and the number of older Jamaicans increases. The report warns that a shrinking base of productive workers will increasingly have to support spending on pensions, healthcare, and long-term care, potentially worsening fiscal pressures and inequality without policy intervention. The challenge is compounded by significant income disparities. ECLAC's analysis found that only Jamaicans in the highest income quartile generate a substantial economic surplus during their working years. For the bottom two quartiles, consumption exceeds labor income at every age, while the third quartile records only a minimal surplus during working years. ECLAC says Jamaica will need to raise productivity, expand workforce participation, particularly among women, improve earning opportunities, and strengthen social protection as the population ages. In corporate news, Caribbean Producers Jamaica CPJ is pointing to October and November as a potential turning point for Jamaica's tourism recovery, as more hotel rooms are expected to return to service following Hurricane Melissa. The food and beverage distributor says reduced hotel capacity continues to weigh on its business, with the fallout particularly significant given CPJ's exposure to the hospitality sector. CPJ Chairman Richard Pandowi says the return of more hotel rooms later this year could help restore demand and improve the company's performance.
We have substantially improved, and we believe that come end of October, as one Baez said in his presentation, end of October, November, with more hotel rooms opening and business, can come back, you'll start to see CPJ numbers going in the right direction. But challenging year, resilience, as he said, and overcoming adversity, that's what this year has been about.
CPJ says it has been working to redirect more products into the domestic retail market while the hospitality industry rebuilds. But Chairman Richard Pandowi says a sustained improvement will ultimately depend on the reopening of hotel rooms and the return of visitors.
But over $20 million of inventory was destroyed. So we had a reverse effect. So we had that to deal with, which is being dealt with an insurance claim. And then the other part of it is that the goods I had left, you suddenly had an excess of inventory, because with 60 or 70% of your hotel rooms closed, all those wines, etc., so they didn't have a home to sell to. So that's what we're trying to pivot into the retail space, etc. But ultimately, what we need is for the hotels to reopen back the rooms to get going, visitors to come back to Jamaica. You saw this year, Sumfest was reduced to one night after we moved from Montego Bay. When you sit in Kingston, it's hard to imagine the impact of the hurricane has had on the West and continues to have. And we're not immune to it, but we certainly feel optimistic that come end October, November, recovery will be on the way in terms of the hotel.
CPJ says changes to its distribution network are cutting transportation costs and improving delivery times as the company deepens its integration with the wider Separate Group. But the chairman says CPJ is now using warehousing capacity in Kingston to eliminate that additional movement.
All the containers come in for CPJ, the ones that came into Kingston, most of it had to be taken to Montego Bay. Yeah. And then 40% of your sale is in Kingston and St. Curtin, that to be put in a truck and come back on the toll and sell, then they have to go back. No, those products go straight into a Kingston warehouse. So they cut down the cost dramatically, quicker time to the consumer, so improve your customer service level. It allows us more time to sell as opposed to us driving around. Those are some of the examples that are going to accrue to the business and to shareholders ultimately.
That was Caribbean Producers Jamaica Chairman Richard Pandowi. We move to the latest updates from the JSE equities. In Wednesday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 110 stocks, of which 48 advanced, 41 declined, and 21 traded firm. Leading the winners are One Great Studio Company, Proven Group USD, Access Financial Services, and Cygnus Real Estate Financial JMD. While leading the losers are Everything Fresh, Sterling Investments, MPC Caribbean Clean Energy, and Caribbean Assurance Brokers. The main index declined by 831.68 points to close at 369,026.38 points. The junior market index advanced by 17.77 points to close at 2,918.71 points. It's time for the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. In today's Market Education feature, we're talking about the Eastern Caribbean dollar and its origins. The Eastern Caribbean dollar, or XCD, is the official currency of 8 Caribbean countries and territories, including St. Lucia, Grenada, Dominica, and Anguilla. It is issued by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and has been pegged to the US dollar since 1976, helping to support monetary stability across the currency union. The XCD was introduced in 1965, replacing the British West Indies dollar, and is divided into 100 cents. More than 6 decades later, the Eastern Caribbean dollar remains a key part of trade and economic activity across the region. That was the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, Tease the Senses, and Pulse Investments.
Wealth is not simply counted in dollars or cents, but in the time we spend with love, in love, giving love. Wealth is not simply a means to an end. It is the means to live out loud. Wealth is more than money. It's about family, the memories you create, the legacy you leave behind, and your ability to enjoy life in the moment. It's also about seeing the QMAX possibilities and seizing investment opportunities to achieve the future you want and deserve. Which is why QMAX Wealth will focus on your investments so you can experience more. Because true wealth is truly more. To start investing today, call 876-926-7767.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. The Dominican Republic could potentially mobilize resources equivalent to nearly 3% of GDP by closing gaps in value-added tax collection, according to a new International Monetary Fund (IMF) analysis. An IMF Fiscal Affairs Department technical assistance mission conducted between December 2024 and March 2025 found that the compliance gap for the tax on transfers of industrialized commodities and services, or ITBIS ITBIS, stood at 36.5% of potential revenue in 2023, equivalent to 2.9% of GDP. That was down from a peak of 41.6% in 2020 when the COVID-19 crisis disrupted VAT systems. The largest compliance gaps were identified in construction, trade, hotels and restaurants, and professional services, areas the fund says offer significant potential for additional revenue collection. The IMF is recommending annual assessments of the ITBIS gap, stronger links between tax payments, refunds and declarations, and greater coordination between the tax administration and finance ministry. St. Lucia is seeking to better align the skills of its workforce with labor market demand, as government research points to shortages in key technical fields. Speaking during a press briefing on Monday, Education, Youth Development and Sports Minister Kenson Casimir says government research has identified worker shortages across several technical fields.
All of our research is showing that we need more technical skills in terms of TVET education in St. Lucia. More plumbers, more electricians, more individuals that are into woodwork technology and carpentry and joinery.
He says the findings are being used to encourage young people to pursue skills that offer stronger employment prospects.
That is the information that we are garnering. So once we have that information, we can encourage young people. That is why we have the TVET institutes opened up. That is why we are making these opportunities available to them. And we will be announcing another opportunity very soon for young people in TVET. That is why we create all of these opportunities for our people to gain employment. Will we still have individuals coming home with certain degrees and not getting work? Yes, that is a fact, that is a reality. But we as a government, we continue to encourage people to be as broad-based as possible so that it can increase the chances of them getting some form of employment for themselves and family.
And while the government is encouraging young people to pursue skills that are in high demand locally, Casimir says St. Lucia is also looking beyond its borders to expand employment opportunities for skilled nationals who may not find work in their specialized fields at home. At the same press briefing, he acknowledged that the country's small economy cannot absorb every graduate, with the government seeking stronger links with companies and organizations across the region to create a wider market for St. Lucian skills.
The fact of the matter is, you do want individuals to study what they believe is within their purview to study and their skills being harnessed and that sort of thing. As a minister, my duty is to ensure that there's a more equitable space on a global market for our skills that are coming back in St. Lucia. So creating that symbiotic relationship with some of the biggest companies, the biggest organizations, the global funds, to ensure that when young people come back in St. Lucia and they do have a degree in a particular skill, that they don't look at only St. Lucia as being a possible place for them to work, but they can get some form of employment somewhere in the region as opposed to coming back with a degree and sitting home and being unemployed.
That was St. Lucia's Minister of Youth Development, Kenson Casimir. In financial news, Angostura Holdings Limited has reported lower revenue and profit for the first half of 2026 as higher local excise duties and challenging international market conditions weighed on performance. Consolidated revenue fell 4% to $468 million for the 6 months ended June 30, while profit after tax declined 8% to $62 million. Angostura attributed the weaker performance to softer consumer demand in some international markets, geopolitical uncertainty, and trade disruptions. Its domestic business, however, recorded 7% revenue growth, supported by demand for its core rum portfolio and ready-to-drink products. The company says it also absorbed a significant portion of higher local excise duties instead of passing the full increase onto consumers, putting pressure on margins while helping to protect market share. At the same time, international volumes increased 2.6%, while premium rum revenue jumped 49%. Angostura chairman Gary Hunt says it remains focused on premium brands, international distribution, and operational efficiency as it positions for improved performance when global market conditions strengthen. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 19 securities, of which 6 advanced, 3 declined, and 10 traded firm. Today's winners are One Caribbean Media, Guardian Media, First Citizens Group Financial Holdings, and Trinidad and Tobago NGL, while leading the losers are Grace Kennedy, Massey Holdings, and Guardian Holdings. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All-TNT Index advanced by 4.22 points to close at 1,438.36. The Composite Index also advanced, but by 0.58 points to close at 1,008.61. However, the Cross-Listed Index declined by 0.48 points to close at 76.88, while the SME Index remained at 71.72. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. What you put in is what you get out. What you put in is what you get out. Yeah. Build up your body, boost up your brain. Take on the world now. Say bye-bye pain. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Be good to you. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Distributed by Amalgamated Distributors Limited.
Welcome back. In international news, Germany's benchmark 10-year bond yield is holding around 3.1% as higher oil prices and uncertainty surrounding the Middle East keep inflation and interest rate risks firmly in focus. Euro area inflation accelerated to 2.9% in July from 2.8% in June, while one-year inflation expectations are running at around 2.4% above the European Central Bank's 2% target. At the same time, stronger economic activity is giving policymakers more room to keep monetary policy restrictive. The euro area economy expanded 0.4% in the second quarter, its strongest quarterly performance since early 2025. With inflation still elevated and growth showing resilience, markets remain focused on the prospect of further ECB tightening, although the central bank has not committed to another rate increase. In the United States, energy markets are digesting a major inventory surprise. U.S. crude inventories recorded their largest weekly increase in 3.5 years, defying expectations for a decline as imports jumped and exports fell sharply. The Energy Information Administration says crude stockpiles surged by 17.4 million barrels in the week ending August 7, reaching 424.4 million barrels. Markets had expected inventories to fall by roughly 1.4 million barrels. Crude stocks at the key Cushing, Oklahoma delivery hub also increased, while refinery inputs edged higher. Gasoline inventories moved in the opposite direction, declining by nearly 1 million barrels to 208.7 million, while distillate stocks were little changed. The massive crude build was driven partly by a sharp shift in international flows, with imports increasing while U.S. crude exports fell to their lowest level since November 2025. Meanwhile, easing U.S. rate concerns are supporting precious metals. Silver climbed toward $66 an ounce Wednesday, reaching its highest level in 8 weeks as U.S. inflation data reduced concerns about an imminent Federal Reserve rate hike. Core consumer prices increased 0.2% in July and 2.5% from a year earlier, broadly matching expectations and supporting the case for the Fed to remain cautious on further monetary tightening. Investors are also monitoring developments surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, with uncertainty over U.S.-Iran relations continuing to influence commodity markets. Pakistan's defense minister said Washington and Tehran were close to an arrangement to reopen the key waterway, while President Donald Trump claimed the United States had total control of the strait. Beyond interest rates and geopolitical uncertainty, silver continues to benefit from its industrial uses, including demand associated with solar energy and electricity infrastructure. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
In today's world, attention is valuable, visibility matters, and powerful storytelling can shape influence, build brands, and drive connections. This is CBX, a dynamic media and production division of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. CBX helps businesses, institutions, and leaders connect with audiences in powerful ways. From real-time market updates to live streaming, digital campaigns, executive features, social media management, and large-scale social projects, CBX delivers content with purpose, precision, and impact. We create moments that inform, experiences that engage, and content that moves audiences across platforms and across the region. Whether on screen, online, in studio, or on location, CBX helps businesses amplify their voice and elevate their presence. Powered by creativity, strategy, technology, and execution, CBX brings together media production, digital storytelling, and communications expertise under one integrated network. CBX, creating content, driving conversations, elevating businesses. CBX, your region, your business, your source.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, ILO puts Melissa's hit to Jamaica's economy at 2.9% of GDP. Regionally, IMF sees major revenue potential in Dominican Republic tax gap. And internationally, German bond yields hold near 3.1% as ECB rate hike bets build. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.
The Caribbean Business Exchange now presents a local feature from the Jamaica Information Service. Pleasant viewing.
Hello there, it's Tuesday, the 11th day of August. I'm your host, Adrian Atkinson. A very special welcome to our viewers at home and abroad and anyone joining us for the very first time. We have an informative show lined up just for you today, highlighting some of the initiatives and developments taking place right here at home. Stay with us. Jamaica Magazine continues after this break.
What's really inside your child's drink? Let's count it out. A 600 milliliter soda can contain 15 to 20 teaspoons of sugar, but the recommended daily allowance for children ages 2 to 18 is less than 6 teaspoons. And that 450 milliliter box drink, it can contain 12 to 15 teaspoons of sugar. Children under 2 should have no added sugar at all. So instead of reaching for sugary drinks, encourage your children to drink water, because when you know what's in the drink, making healthier choices is easy.
Good day, I'm Theodore Henry, and this is your JIS News for Tuesday, August 11, 2026. Residents and business operators across several parishes are being advised to brace for prolonged water restrictions starting Monday, August 17. Affected parishes are Kingston, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, St. Mary, Portland, St. Anne, and St. Catherine. In a media release, the Ministry of Water, Environment and Climate Change says the prohibition notice will be issued for these parishes on August 12 by the National Water Commission, NWC. Under the orders, persons are not allowed to use water supplied by the NWC for non-essential or unusual purposes. These include irrigation or watering of gardens, lawns, grounds, and farms. Washing of vehicles with the use of a hose is also prohibited, so too are the watering or washing of roadways, pavements, garages, or outrooms. The NWC says any activity requiring excessive or unusual quantities of water is not allowed. During the period, there should be no refilling or supplying of ponds or swimming pools for use other than normal domestic services, such as drinking, cooking, washing, bathing, and sanitation. At a recent press briefing, Portfolio Minister Matthew Samuda warned that a prohibition was likely as the island prepares for the new school year in September.
No, it is not that the systems and the storage are at critical levels today, but the rainfall that would normally come at the